Okay, I hope you all have the text in front of you. This new Kuntres, this Kuntres of Rebbe Shab. We'll learn this Beseda. We'll see if we can get something out of this in Lamaisa. This Rambam, Rebbe Shalom Berel of Lubavitch, was a very, very profound thinker, very close to Chaim Brisker, actually. They were quite close. It starts as a typical, this discourse Hasidic discourses may start with a pasuk, but the purpose about Hasidus is not to say Beret Lachan Chumash, but to somehow base it on something, but it stands on its own as an idea. Therefore, you'll find these type of things, the words here that you could say, Shabbos at the table, push it hard, very good work. Okay, so the pasuk says in Bamidbar in Perik Chafei, Vayeshi Yisrael Bashitim. Bashitim. Do you know? It doesn't say Bishitim, it says Bashitim, in the Shitim. Now, what does that mean? Bashitim, so Rashi says Kach Shema. That's its name, but still doesn't answer the question, so it should say Bishitim. Why does it say Bashitim? Seems to be the idea that the place obviously influenced them to a certain reality, and they were residing within that context. One has to understand what it means, Bashitim, and because they were sitting Bashitim, not just Bishitim. Even Unkla said Yesib Yisrael Bashitim, and it says over this, whatever Yachela Amlish not of not Moav. Somehow, because they were in a mindset of Bashitim, this is what led them to be Mizana with Nois Moyev, to follow their taivas. So let's see what the Rebbe writes here in this Kuntres. The pasuk says in Yalu, Umaayon mi Beit Hashem yatzei, and a fountain will come out of the house of God. V'yishkoes Nachal Hashitim, it will finally give new water to Nachal Hashitim. As Nachal Hashitim needs water mi Beit Hashem. Now, what does that mean? So basically, this comes dealing with this pasuk. Here we had them sitting in Shitim, and that created Znus. Now, a Nachal Yotzim Beis Hashem will ultimately fix that reality. Implication seems to be that Bas Shitim is a state of mind in which is still existing Ada Yom Hazeh, and therefore, with the Nabi said, the day will come where metaphorically that Nachal will have to be filled with Mayim Yotzim Beis Hashem, to rectify the situation that the challenge that we are living with. So he starts and brings Hine b'medrash Rabbah in Balak Perik Pasha Chaf, Mefaresh Shitim Lashon Shtus, living not intelligently, a shaita. What is shaita? Living not intelligently. Now, what does that mean? So he said, Hine b'Sefer HaShorashim, if you open up the Sefer HaShorashim of the Radak, of David Kimchi, b'Shorish Shita, at the root of Shita, Shin Tes Hey, Mefaresh Shitim, Lashon Hataya, swerving to a certain, so we have a Shita, my Shita. What does it mean? It's my going off the mainstream, going off to my opinion, my unique separate idea. So Hataya means swerving away from a reality. Ki Tiste Ishto. What does Tiste Ishto mean? Rashi, Tiste, Tate. She will swerve away, she will walk away from the mainstream road of Tzniut, and that's what Kitistei Ishto means. Vatagum al Vayet Eleha, as we know, the pasuk by Yehuda when he went off the highway to meet the prostitute, which happened to have been his daughter-in-law Tamar. It says Vayet Eleha Usita Levasei. Again, he sata sotah. He swerved towards her. Hashem zinikra Yetzirah Satan. Why is the Yetzer Hara called Satan? Because he creates stiya. He creates movie listot me'aderech hachacham. Usoteh vayet. Okay. Tiste ishto. Lechen Yetzer nikra Satan. Hashem shemaste umate es adam miderech hatov. That's why he's called Satan. He creates a reality of stiya. V'achar kach mastin lemala. Then he becomes a prosecutor up there. He also goes to his angle of Kitruk. What does he do? And once again, he has his shita, he does his thing. He pushes us off the derech, then he goes off the regular derech, which should be derech hamamutza. It should be tiferes, and he does Kitruk. He goes gvura, which is exactly why he's called Satan. So now we understand. So when we talk about Shittim, we're talking about the place where, as the Medrash says, where intelligence is not the dominant factor. Adraba, you are Soita Miderech HaChocham. Zeu Gam Kem Hashim Meforish BeMidrash Shittim Loshen Shtus. This is what the Medrash says when Nachal Shittim means Shtus. What does that mean? So he says, Ki Ashtus Iyin Ashtusu Atoya Miderech HaEmes. If there's a thing called an absolute truth, well, this shtus is walking away from the truth. Let's understand what that means. We'll first finish the paragraph, then I'll explain it. We find Chazal connecting these two ideas. As you all know, we somehow write it with the samach, but the Chumash writes it with the sin. A shin with the dot on the left side. The Rambam also today in modern they wrote the site the samach. And your Shas is written the samach, but in the Franco Rambam or the original manuscripts, it's written hilchos soita with a sin, not with the samach, based on the lashon hamikra. It means shoita, soita. She's soita min haderech. So he says al pasuk itis the isha ein adam over avera el imkei nichnas boy ruach shtus. And this comes the word ki tishte. That means she does a ruach shtus. Hareisha shita v'shtus hu inyan echad. Here you have it. She'u hataya miderech ha'emes. Walking away from an objective truth, or derech ha'toiv, that which is maybe rewarding, that which should make you feel good. Walking from that which is called good, or that which is called emes. I got this on this. I don't think I'm going to bother with it. Let's try to understand. Before we go further, we have to understand what these words mean. We discussed this long in the past based on Rambam and Hilchos in Moreh Nevuchim, the first chelik, the second chapter, to differentiate the things which are called good, emes and sheker versus toiv and ra. We have to bring this up now because it's going to be very pertinent in another paragraph. Rambam writes over there that when Adam was originally, or rather Adam Arishon, when not in Homo sapien, an anecdote, okay? The Sephorna points out that on that Friday, originally sapien was made together with all the nefesh chaya. In other words, all the Neanderthals and everything else was created then with nefesh chaya. It's only afterwards that God took maybe one of them or whatever, he took one of them and made them into a Homo sapien. That's when he was nishmas chayim, etc. In other words, there were sapiens which were not, they don't have Tzelem Elokim, which don't have that neshama. There was no Vayipu Be'apa Nishmas Chayim. They have a neshama like a behema, a nefesh Bahamas. They don't have a nefesh Elokis. Only a certain, he literally writes this for it, that there was a evolutionary process in creation of Homo sapien. This can answer, once we take that thing, we can understand multiple ideas with paleontology. He doesn't think that when it says originally creating man and blowing into him the neshama is the process. It started with nefesh chaya, together with the animals and the lizards and I don't know what. Afterwards, he chose to take this sapien and make him into what you would call Homo sapien. That would help you understand many things. So whatever it only be, what exactly was the difference? What was the mindset of the Homo sapien when he was created? So the Rambam says he understood truths, absolute truths. Now, when I say emes, the word emes, as we all know, does not mean true, because true is a relative term. True is a relative term. True for what? True is a relative term. Absolute truth, it means to say there's nothing opposite of it. There's nothing all there. There's nothing all there. When absolute truth is an absolute existence, which is God, okay? But then we have relative truth. Compared to this is wrong. If 1 and 1 is 2, if I compare 2 to 2, 1 and 1, they are equal. That is called relative truth. Absolute truth would be God's existence outside of, not because something, the components which make him, not because it's equal to anything. There's no equal sign in the truth of God. That's an absolute truth. That's a Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Yesod HaTorah. So whatever it be, Adam, Homo sapien, when he had his nefesh elokis, he all of a sudden, he saw only truths. He looked at reality and he understood what its purpose was. And he looked at everything and said, is it purposeful? Is it not purposeful? That's why he had no problem walking around nude, because he saw no difference between any organ in his body. They were all functional for a certain purpose, the purpose for X, Y, or Z, which will lead to the purpose of God's creation of existence. And therefore, every organ is needed for that. You say that the nishma. There's no difference between anything in your body. There's nothing to be ashamed about. They're all tashmishe mitzvah, as one would put it mildly, okay, or tashmishe kedusha. That's all it is. It is only afterwards, and instantly, according to my mind, it was prior to eating the fruit. It was with the enticement, the dialogue between Eve or Chava, whatever he's called, and the serpent, which they chose to look into another mindset, and they demoted themselves from looking just into objective truths, but also into relative realities. What does it make me feel like? For example, when you see something is good, I've mentioned this multiple times. What does the word good mean? Good for you. Good for society, good for. The word good is always for something. I'm in Kerem Yavin at the moment. This is a yishuv, which basically, as most cities, the towns around here, where this is the domain of the animal and the insect. We've invaded. And therefore, you'll see in the houses here, you'll have ants, you'll have bugs, you'll have lizards. And I have no problem because we invaded their domain. This is the reality. So we tried to lock them out, but this is the Metzius. If you go to KBY, you see on the walls all these weird lizards running around all over the place. Okay, now what our natural reaction to this is something quite violent. When we put up this machinery which will zap the mosquitoes, and if you see a lizard, you'll see what you will do. You're not going to be nice about it. You're going to step on it, etc. Are you doing something good? Yes, for you, for your comfort. Are you doing something for the lizard? It's quite bad. He would like to continue living. So what does it mean, good or bad? It depends for who. One would say, was Adolf Hitler a bad person? Well, that would depend for who. He thinks he was good, and the people around him thought he was good. He was freeing the world from the vermin called the Jews, which have conned the world to think they're a religion, but they're really a nation which is undermining the society. In Mein Kampf, Nachas. You can read it. It's all there. Okay, he's actually saving society, bringing back to the natural order of reality. These terrible Jews, which are a nation with a culture of blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit. That is against nature, and that is destroying the fiber of society. He is freeing them. So as far as he's concerned, he's doing mamish ha'ma'aseh tzidkus. It's our equivalent of us doing iran yidachas. Literally, if you'd be Jewish, you say Ashen Amalek. It's the same thing. Elamai, for us, it was terribly bad. In truth, as far as Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was wrong. It was bad. It was bad for God. It was bad for us. But is it bad for humanity? Well, it depends. It's a relative term. I can never say, honestly, the man was a bad person. I can't say that. It's not true. Maybe he was. There's something else. Maybe he was an evil person. But as far as the ideology is concerned, he thought he was doing something good. Not just him. I hate to say it. Multitudes of people there thought that it's good. I'm sure these Hamas people, Shem Rishon Yeroke, think they're doing something very special, especially if it's a jihad or whatever these things are. So the word good and bad are irrelevant here. That is the honest truth. What the question is emes or sheker. What does emes mean? Does it fit with the plan of God? Doesn't fit with the plan of God? Does that justify God's existence, creation? Doesn't justify God's creation? That's what's called correct or not correct. Well, in the world of subjective, what it makes you feel, man has now become the center of the equation. Good means good for me. Bad means bad for me. Example being, the Gemara says in Megillah that when it describes the pasuk, it says in one place that God does. The Gemara says, God does not feel good about destroying evil people. It's right. It's a just, correct, wise, evil, but it's evil. It makes them feel bad. That's a pasuk mefurish in Parshas Kiseitza by Ira Nidachas. It says, God promised us that we will not lose compassion after dealing with such a hideous activity of destroying a city. According to Rambam, we'd murder even the minors. Beautiful picture, Mark, here of the little minor here. So here you have it of a minor, and it says, God will infuse us with compassion, because we're going to lose compassion. When you do a thing like that, you become callous. It's like Israeli drivers, you notice, they become callous. You have to literally be on the defensive when you're driving in this country. So they're callous. I understand why. It's a hard life. So what happens is, I will infuse you with compassion. So although you do this thing which is not that pleasant, but you will not lose your sensitivity. It's a beautiful pasuk. And the reason is, Ki asisa es hayashar be'einei Hashem. You did the right thing. So Rabbi Simcha in Meshech Chochmah writes down, it doesn't say, Ki asisa es hayashar be'esatov. We have to remember that, because we're still in the middle of turmoil in this country. We should always remember that murdering, whatever it only be, is yashar. Never say tov. Not in the eyes of God. Even this Russia, Marusha, for goodness sakes, these people there. We would rather not have to do this. It's a necessary evil. God feels irksome even when Yichva Sindas was in Sinbar. Hashem Yemach Shmoi v'chulu v'chulu v'chulu. This person, killing him is right. It's not good. We should never feel good about any violence. It's a very important thing to remember that. And believe me, I'm not a left-winger. I'm a right-wing flag-waving person. Not a fascist, but quite centrist. But this is maybe it's my Western upbringing, which is allowing me to feel comfortable with this. But this is the way it is. So we have to understand there's difference between Toiv and emes. There are two separate issues. There's things which are correct and things which are good. There are two issues totally. So basically, because good is something, should you feel good about it? No. Should you feel correct about it? Yes. Should you feel good that you're doing the correct thing? Yes. That you should do. We have no mitzvah to hate anybody, the worst person on earth, except for Amalek. There's a mitzvah of hating Amalek. That's a Rambam, a Sefer HaMitzvahs. We have no mitzvah to hate our opponents and our Shainim and our Roitzchim. We don't have that at all. But I want to put this on the table, because we're not supposed to relate to this as something good. We're supposed to relate to something that's correct. Very hard for us to do today, because we don't live in a world of correct and not correct. That's not how we function. We function constantly. We need the incentive of feeling good about something to do it. According to Maimonides, this is the downfall of man, which started with the Chet Eitz Hadas. That was introduced to Eve with the Nachash. The Nachash told her, you will know not just truth and non-truth, you will know relative feelings of Tov and Ra. She took into that, and she bit into that, and she gave that to her husband. This is what the sin was. It's only because they moved into that and looked into what they call their desires, what made them feel good. That's what made them eat the fruit. So the downfall was pre the eating of the fruit, by internalizing the suggestion of the Nachash. This is an interesting idea. Please read Maimonides, the first chelik of Moreh Nevuchim, the second chapter. That everyone asked the question, how could he sin? The answer is because he spoke to the wrong person, and he enjoyed the idea. He decided to internalize the idea, though he fell. He fell like nothing immediately. And this is what it says. So we understand that people we have to understand the difference between Tov versus emes. Now here the issue is as follows. So that's what he says. You know what happens? Shtus is when you stop thinking about the truth. Or you could say Tov be'einei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not Tov be'einecha, because when you want a certain obsessive desire, that is Tov for you. But it's not Tov in the cosmic way of what God feels good about. That's what you would have to say. So emes is something you can perceive. That's an objective reality. Toiv means you have to think of Toiv B'einei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not B'Toiv B'einei Atzma. Because I believe me that every chayte which does an aveira, at that time he feels he's doing Toiv La'atzma. There's no question, but he's Soite Miderech HaEmes. So here he says something very important. Look at the third paragraph. V'inyan hu, Dinei Masha Adam Bala Aval Divrei Torah. A person, what causes man to sin? And he falls after the obsessive desires of his emotions. Man is drawn to pleasure. What draws man to pleasure? It's very clear. He wants to feel good. He's nimsha achar ha'toiv and not achar ha'emes. Everything you do is because you want to feel good about yourself, including, by the way, your mitzvahs. I don't want to say terrible things. Many people do mitzvahs not because they are the truth, because they're an Eved Mul Rabbi, but simply because it makes you feel good because of how you grew up in the society you're in, etc., etc., etc. I don't mean your Olam Haba. I mean even here in this world. You feel comfortable being religious, so you keep on putting on tefillin. How many people do we know that put on tefillin because this is the emes? Because this is, without that, there's no justification for creation or for being. How many people feel that if I'm not Mamali Ritzon Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a waste of space and tashlis on the oxygen? Yechidim mamish. Let's be very honest about this. So let's see what he says over here. That is the source of sin. He will explain. There's no issue having a good Scotch fillet steak with a nice glass of, Lafrogue, there's no problem with it at all. But no, if you look for obsessive desires and gashes more than actually what you really need, and we're talking health-wise, we're not talking psychologically, because psychologically includes tivus. That's not an objective reality. There's an objective reality, what you really need. The tzarich kiyum gufay, what is needed for nutrition? How many of us eat for nutrition, or do we eat because we have tivus? I don't think the tivus include all these good oily egg rolls and potato chips and these hamburgers where I'd rather not know what their content is, and pizza, which is definitely, any cardiologist will tell you, eating fatty substances like that. Phil, tell them about it. It's geferlach. You're plugging up your arteries. Let's face it, they'll put a stent into you eventually, if they'll be able to. So we realize this is not the kiyum aguf. This is hadrabah. Alpha-P that you're drinking Coca-Cola, and Alpha-P that you're eating eclairs, and Alpha-P that you're eating steak and chips with chulu. Alpha-P cane, you may live to 80. Would you believe it? But that's Alpha-P cane. It's not Miglal cane. This is called Nimshach HaChartaibus Gufa Ereze Gam cane. Ha'avora al darkei Torah. You are transgressing on the ways of the Torah. Why? Shemechuyav kol echad ve'echad lekadesh es atzmai b'muter loy. Now, what's he inferring here? He's inferring to the Ramban in the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, which writes exactly that's what Kedoshim Tiyu means. And Rashi brings it down. Also bring Parshas Kedoshim, Kadesh asamcha b'muter lecha. Abstain from that which is mutter. What does it mean? So he adds, this is very interesting to see this chinuch. I have it in front of me, so we're going to read it. Shu mitzvahs asay d'oraisa. V'chein hiskim b'sefer shabenim, which is Tanya Perik Lamed. I want you to see that we have. I think I have it. I'm going to read the chinuch. I think the chinuch was sent to you on there. And here he writes, in chinuch is a mitzvah shin pei ches parshas kairach. So the chinuch, this is on the Isser of Lois Asur Achel Levavchem V'Achrei Einechem. It's in there of Shlach. Excuse me. Shlach. Kemel Kain Shelo Yirdef Ha'adam Acher Mare Einov. That's the Isser Lois Asur Achel Levavchem V'Achrei Einechem. People don't realize this Mamsha Halacha. You don't follow whatever your eyes show you. You don't look for just things which are not necessary for kiyum aguf, but what you call taivas olam hazeh. Do you want that strawberry shortcake? Do you want that big Scotch fillet? The 500-gram thing. Okay, and so muzay pink dazay medium rare, and is the opposite. B'chulu b'chulu, and make sure the mayo is visidaftzazite. I only want Hellman's. Ich weiß was together on top of specifically these potatoes, these fries, b'chulu, and obviously then I want some Perrier on them gates nicht. You know what I mean? Is all this is what he says. Uchlal the lisa leisa suach lebavka marchanechem is lirdef achar taibus olam hazeh. Ki achrisam ro k'dai bizoyim v'ketzep v'zeh she'amru zichroinu levracha v'leisa suach lebavchem zeh minus v'acharnechem zeh znus she'nema v'yem hashim shel aviv oisa kachli ki yishoro be'einai. He followed his eyes. Shtei doin chinuch, which is what I'll show you in 2 minutes, that looking for taibus olam hazeh are included when it says znus. By lois zoach levaf and doesn't just mean znus; it means any taibus olam hazeh. The very big chiddush ladina. Okay. When you go down, I have it written underlined over here, and this is what he writes: Ki ataiva timshech habasha kimshech hayayin el shoysa. People who are used to obvious obsessive desire, it draws you. It's addictive. Just like alcohol is addictive. People are gluttons when it comes to wine. It'll never be enough. The more you drink, the more you need. Whatever you're used to, you have more taiva. The Gemara says, "Ever katan yesh ba'adam, ma'rivai saveya must be a roiv." Certain argument that we have that if you keep it not used to, it doesn't use too much, so then it will be satiated. If you use it too much, it's always hungry. He says, the marshal, he says, Ubimano mehem, he writes, and when you refrain from taibis, Yismach bechelkai tamid kol hayoim, he will be happy, will be satisfied with himself. Yirek Elohim asas adam yashar. Ve'ein bikshu cheshbonis rabim leloy te'elis shel klum. In other words, doing any material activity which has no te'elis, at least for kiyum aguf or etc., this is something which is taibis. And he writes on this, look at the bottom, a person who transgresses the law of loisa sur achel levav kumarachrei nechem, v'yiched machshavtei b'inyanim ele, he sits down and plans, how am I going to get this? That's us. Okay, where am I going to go? In which dinner? Going to sit in front of the menu, and be mavara the menu like it's a taisus, and with a ksais. Okay. Shezachan shemivim adam lotzes midach tas Torah seinu hashlema v'anikia ulikonis b'das hama'abilim ha'koifim ra umar v'chein mishu tar achrei eino kleimar shu roidev acher taivus ha'olam kigon shu mesim liboy tamid laharbis tanugim g'dolim l'nafshoy. That's what his plan is. Brother, I'm going out for 4 weeks vacation at Acapulco. He's got it planned how he's going to really have a party. Can you please tell me any kavanah taiva in this bori? Not doing it for health. If I'm healthy, I can actually do avodas Hashem. Elamai, why is he doing it? He's going to Laguna Beach. No, let me tell you, he's going to Laguna not because he'd like to see the Catalina from far, because there's a lot of happening there in Laguna, right? So you want an Avera, which we do Tamid 365 days a year. It's like the Surah Achrei Nechem. That's a Mefursh Chinuch. Now the Mokkah, the Chinuch is a Rambam. Let's read the Rambam. Rambam is in mitzvahs, Loisa Sem Mitzvah Mem Zayin. The mitzvah she'ziranu shalota tu'achila bavenu. And if you go to the bottom of that, literally, after he brings the story with Shimshon that he was Znus, he reads, Ba'amra yizeh znus, last 2-3 lines of that piece, himashech achei ha'anaot v'tavot ha'gashmiyot v'tasek ha'machshava b'hen tamid. Literally, what the chinuch is, he elaborated on this, but the core is they literally say from mitzvah the Rambam, mitzvah loises mem zayin. So we understand that b'chlal, society, I don't want to judge it, but the society the way it is, if you can add this, you don't even have to add the al-chet. It's one big walking al-chet. We're pretty good. We don't go. We're not into kfira and minus. We're nice Orthodox Jews. But it seems to be a major issue. So that's what he writes. This is the chara davar aser. It's not just a problem. You're going after taiva. It's not just, oh, you're not from. No, you push every Naveira, Allah, according to Rambam and Chinuch. I don't know anybody in the Rishonim which disagrees. I'm going to say it very bluntly, okay? I know you're there. This is la halacha l'maisa. It's a love. It's as simple as that. Below hutar rak masha. The Rebbe reads further. I'm reading what the Rebbe writes. Below hutar rak masha l'tzarech kiyam gufay. What is mutter is only b'tzarech kiyam aguf for your health. So you actually have to start eating for nutrition. Or sometimes you have a obsessive desire to have a pizza. It's a tzarech iyun gadol. Okay? Are you going to say, well, at the moment, if I want to have a pizza, I'll go crazy? What's the halacha? At the moment you have a taiva for a znus of an eshes ish, is also mutter. If the taiva is aser, by nafkamina between the znus of eshes ish and the taiva of this, if taiva samutaris is aser, leisosuru, what's the nafkamina? If it's taiva samutaris or taiva sasuris? The only heter for taiva samutoris is because you can do it not als taiva, nor als kiyum haguf, la'avodas Hashem. This is what it boils down to be. I'm saying this is not divrei Haggadah. This is Sefer HaMitzvahs. I never heard Sefer HaMitzvahs to be divrei Haggadah in my life. Maybe the chinuch we can chalk up for Rambam. So he said, "Lo'huter rak mashu l'tzarech kiyum gufay." Why? Because he wants to live intelligently. Forget God for the moment. He wants to live intelligently. Okay, would you believe it? There he adds, not only you're doing the tzarech haguf, but you don't even do it because of the savory taste. One has to understand it is true that God made the savory taste. Obviously, it's an incentive, which means to say that it's mutter. There's no issur of eating savory food and choosing a food because it tastes good in order to eat healthy food. Granted, that's very true. But to eat only for that, that's definitely an aveira. Okay? To eat that for the purpose of nutrition, and you're drawn to it because of the taiva, that would be mutter. But he says, the bigger dargan avoida, that you don't really care about the taste. Now that's obviously not part of the halacha because that God would it's shemesh. No, we are allowed as long as it's done for kiyum aguf and part of kiyum. That's why God made the taste for you to be drawn to it in order for you to eat it. There's no issue of putting salt on something, but l'chayre, if you are drawn to it because of the taste, then one would expect you to not to put on salt in order to train yourself not to do it because of the salt. Afterwards, put as much as you want. And the idea, to what extent is the food controlling you, and what is not you controlling yourself and using the food as a means towards an end? You shouldn't want the pleasure. The pleasure is there. So you are going to have the pleasure because the pleasure is an incentive for you to experience the food, because at the end goal it should be for nutrition. I repeat, even before we get the idea of Shem Shemayim, the question is, eat it for its an emes, because it's the truth. The body needs nutrition. Now, why do you want to live? Because you want to have nutrition, because you want to be Ovid Hashem. Granted, that's stage 2. But first and foremost, whatever you do, ask yourself the question, why? We're talking here about religious growth. This is where he starts. It starts with not doing anything without thinking and asking why. And many times I've said, what the Rambam writes in Hilchos Torah, he discusses over there, since Talmud is nothing more than Davar Katan, that's simple. Davar Gadol is philosophy, etc. She says, why do we start with Talmud? And he writes before we shouldn't do anything before we know all of Avayis, the Avayis Rava. Now, writes before that we don't engage in other disciplines before we have total command of knowing all the dialogues of Abaye Rava, which are a synonym to knowing Shas. I mean, l'chayra, well, during the times of the Talmud, we figured that by age of 18 to 20, you finished. So then you can go and do your PhD in philosophy. That's probably what Rambam did. Today, we live a convoluted world. I'm not going into that. I don't want to discuss at the moment the educational, what they call system. But it doesn't fit with Chazal. Whatever it only be, you must. So the Rambam writes, why should you first learn Shas? Because it's miyashe b'samoach v'salev. It disciplines your thinking and your feelings. So the students once asked me, how's that true? Because look at the Gemara. Every statement you ask, my taima, minolan, pshita, my nafkamina. Try living that way. Every time you're about to do something, my taima, why do you want to do it? Minolan, from where does it stem from? My nafkamina, what will be the ultimate result? Isn't what you're doing simply obvious? You're just projecting. Think of asking yourself those questions before you do anything. And that's what the Rebbe is telling you here based on the Gemara. That's what shtus is. Shtus is not thinking. Even eating, going to a restaurant, let's dig into the Scotch fillet. That is Havara al Divrei Torah. It's a pretty heavy piece over here. What does he mean? If you look in Tanya in the first Chelik Perek Zayin, he writes, you have to do tshuva on that. Until you did tshuva, that energy is found with the klippos. It does not go to l'mayla. That's not you. That you haven't done anything good there. And you need actually, if you don't do tshuva on that, that's what they called kafakela. When you go up to heaven, they're gonna knock around your soul like the old ladies. They used to knock around the carpets with to take out the dust. Okay, yeah, right. Remember that? Oh wait, I'm going down the 50s together with a scrubber thing for washing machines. Okay, that's how they have to knock out these types out of your neshama. There's a Einish on this. This is not simple. Rag Gomer Lefisha, and we can elevate it with Tshuva, we can elevate it with changing our agenda, and we're going to do this for the Shem Shemayim. So we know now that the beginning of all sin, all of ours, including Adam and Eve, as I pointed out before, starts with Limashech Acher Hataiva. You look at the pasuk. She says, "Vayar." She saw the AC ta'ava hule naim v'nechmod la'askil. It's nice. It's a taiva, and she went and she ate it and she gave it to her husband. After she saw it as a taiva and nechmod, she was the Ram writes this before. That dialogue introduced taivas to her. She was intrigued. She saw it through that paradigm. She blew it. And we blew it, and we still suffer from this Adayim Mazeh. So that's a cloud gadol. Before we go further, Mishicha Achar Taibis is Havora Midar Ke Torah. According to the Rambam and Chinuch, it's a lav of Leisasur Achilabavchem. It's simple as that. According to the Ramban, it's definitely a bittul mitzvah kedoshim too. So running between a lav and an essay, let's put this on the table before we go and have a great time in some dinner or a cigar club party. Okay, that's number one. That's you. People ask me, what is the first stage in Avodas Hashem? Davening? No. What's the first stage? It's called iskafia. Contain yourself. Start thinking and asking why. That's how it starts. If you don't start thinking why you're doing something or why you're drawn to something, you're not going anywhere. The first is that, not davening with kavon and not speaking lashon or the Rebbe is a bummer. First, trachten. That's the stage number one in any true avodas Hashem, just as the first one in any learning of Gemara. As I said before, the question is my taima, minalan, my nafkamina. Those are the big questions that people ask themselves before any. I told you the story of my Rebbe. He didn't move his head before it made sense. I told you the story with the snowball that he got hit with. I'm not going to say it again. That's the way it is. So the Rebbe says, so what makes us being drawn to Taivas? What is it in us? We are intelligent people. Some of us are, we spend our lives thinking. Some of us are scientists or whatever it be. Yet when it comes to tzarech haguf, all of a sudden, as the old saying is, just because I'm a mathematician doesn't mean I'm a rectangle. No, you are. You're supposed to be a thinking person. Why does it come to your daily life? All your thinking is meaningless. You're a very careful businessman. You're a very careful thinker. Yet when it comes to Taivas Olam Hazeh, you and the Behem are the same thing. Elamai a bit more classy. That's all. But there's really no essential difference. What makes man do that? So he says, "V'sibas hamshachar ha'tayvus hanugi ragashmis, v'ayidei asotas ha'yetzer hara." Yes, you're obviously being pushed by what is called the yetzer hara, which is called the nefesh habahamis. Let's understand carefully. Yetzer hara doesn't mean something outside of you. Let's put this on the table, okay? It means to say there is a certain thing in you which is drawing you to that. What is that, asota? It's a feeling. Ki toiv lefon of davar zeh, v'ritay b'hu la'inayim. You feel good about it. You feel good about it, and it creates a tremendous obsessive desire. K'moshi katuv b'chetz eitz hadas. Here he quotes that, and here on my side, I wrote here, I really want you to see it inside. What happened at that stage? So we see first that she engaged in taiva prior to eating it. That was the reason of eating it. The Rebbe continues, I'm flipping the page. So that is the Aleph. So now there's a kitzer here, very beautiful. After every small parak, there's a kitzer. It says, Shitim, Sharsho Shita. Shitim comes to the word Shita. What is Shita? Uboshnei Pirushim, Aleph Hataya, swerving from something. Beis Shtus, nonsense equals swerving from thought. Hatanug gam bidvarim mutarim hu avaral darkei Torah. Point number 2, we learned that any running after taivus, even if it's a davar hamuter, is avaral darkei Torah. It's even a lav, according to the Rambam and Chinuch, and it's definitely a bittul essay according to the Ramban. Ad kidei kach, the Ramban says that is the azhora of the Ben Sora Umayra. Why is the Ben Sora, what's his azhora? How's he punished? Ein onshim akim azhirin. So Ramban writes Mefurish in Pashki Seitze because he's over the azhora of kedoshim to you. Because he's on the slippery path. He's a glutton and he's into food. He wants a shawarma sandwich and his wine. And ultimately, he will lead to, he will go further and further and further. So often the pasuk in Chumash and the Gemara and Sanhedrin, a Mishnah over there in Ayin Aleph, Hashem Saifa Yonera, because that's you become addicted to taivus. So once upon a time, there were innocent taivus of a little wine and meat. Today in Nebuch, it's much worse. How many people do I know have Nebuch taivus that they have to go to rehabs for certain miyasid taivus, etc. And all this is because people aren't asking why. So he says, so here it is, really, number one. We've learned quite a few important things here, and the most important thing is that that we have to think. We have to ask why. Because that's what the Satan does. He makes you obsessively desired not to want to ask yourself. We have an interesting habit of the capability of asking other people embarrassing questions. Just we lack the capability of asking ourselves embarrassing questions. We don't do that. It's a Gemara, right? The Mishnah. You're very good and critical about the halachas. That's not different God. That's a din as far as Negoim is concerned. The Kohen can only see nigay acherim to see where it's tamei or Torah. He can't see nigay atzmai. That's the din. That's what that Mishnah means. He can't check. He can't say tamei or Torah in his own Negoim. But we use it and take it. We also we judge other people, but we don't judge ourselves. We're all pristine, pure, and that's the shtus. So let's go to Perek Beis. It really is a terrible, idiotic behavior. Now, he was going to impress you. This is what makes him feel good. You, Homo sapien, which are you are the chosen of all which is created. God is giving you a cerebellum, which is, wow, so big. And you have what's called Selim Elokim, which Rambam explains you have the capability of transcendent thought. No animal has that. Your cranium has developed more than 30% more than the Neanderthal. Equals God wanted the Nefesh Chaya people were not the goal. It was those people that came together with Taitzia Oris Nefesh Chaya Lemineu, they created the Neanderthals. He wanted the Homo sapien, which is capable of what? Of Lahavin Lahasko, to have to think transcendent thoughts and ask these questions. So you are Bchira Nivraim. Look what happened. Just go to any fossils and look how big your skull is compared to the skull of the Neanderthal. Yes, Mamish, we said Bechusha, Kodesh Baruch Hu wasn't happy with Stam and Adam, which is Nefesh Chaya. He wanted an Adam which can actually think a lot. Yet any person will tell you we don't use that part of the brain too often. And you are Bchira Nivraim. Why would you be drawn to something like that? It makes you are undermining the celestially designed evolutionary process of your cerebellum. Are you thinking? What are you doing? It makes no sense. There are quite a few different types of pleasures. There's the pleasure of a savory food, which is somehow sweet to your palate. That is a sensuous pleasure. He calls that shafalu pachut. Now he's coming from a Rambam. The Rambam is a Mer Nevuchim Chelik Beis, Perek Lamed Vav. By the way, also in Chelik Gimel Perek Ches, okay? And if you want more, Chelik Gimel Perek Mem Ches. I'm adding this. I didn't give it in the sheets, but I suggest you research that again. Beis Lamed Vav, Gimel Ches, and Gimel Mem Ches. When he discusses the Kedusha of the Nazir, he says because the most disgusting thing of man, he follows Aristotle, which writes that the most lowest thing in man is his sensuousness. In that he is animal, he is not thinking. Looking for sensuous feelings is totally your animal instinct. In them bistabahima, he says cherpa yilanu. He quotes Aristotle saying, for the intelligent person to be drawn, even caring about sensuous feelings, is a cherpa. But God made it that way because we have to. Without that, we wouldn't procreate. Without that, we probably wouldn't even eat. Okay, just as the Gemara says, when they took away the Yetzer Hara of a sex, so the hen stopped laying eggs because the roosters weren't doing anything. Yeah, there is a certain sensuousness which is needed for reality, which makes sense, and we accept that. But that's a means towards an end. It's not an end of its own. So how could you possibly take a means and exasperate it and make it into an end of its own, even with it defies the purpose of it? That's what you're doing. So he says, and so Aristotle writes this. And I told you the Rambam in 3 places where he mentioned that's cherpa yulanu. It's a cherpa, the sensuousness of the body. That is we need it, and malasot. But that's not good in any fashion, form, or size for the intelligent person. It is adra. That is what you would call a necessary reality that man should not always think to be drawn to certain things. Otherwise, he may not do it. So this is what it says. It That's a quotation of Mer Nevuchim. This is animal instinct. Yeah, I agree. I still remember, what was the name of that author? Saul Bellow, or whatever it is. Yeah, he says basically when your hormones work, your brain goes dormant. Okay, that's what happens. There are times that your brain goes dormant. I suggest all of us should go to Kibbutz Yavne and look at the behemoths and see what they want all the time. They roll in mud, they eat straw, they essen, they don't. That's all they do all day. She doesn't know anything else. You're following exactly. That is what the animal does. Because it is a sensuous animal, which is normal. That's what he's supposed to be. He doesn't have more. But why you that has not, you're not just not in the, you're not in the animal, you're at Tzelem Elokim. You have the capability of being, Aristotle and Einstein. And God gave you all that capability, and yet what are you doing? You're closing the door on your brain, and you work from, I hate to say it, from Halavai would be from throat down. It's now from waist down. Okay, that's what man is defined by. Okay, today the society we live in defines yourself not by anything else, but by your sexual desires, which is indicative of the society I'm in. That the brain went dead a long time ago. Even the heart, no one cares about. You're defined by your we call sexual orientation, if I remember the word correctly. Okay, what are you doing? You're telling me I am depending what's under my belt. What about what's all above the belt? What about my personality? What about my brain? All that is gone. That's the society we live in. So here he says, Mefurish, Shtus Naira b'chizat Taiva she'elav yimshech ha'adam b'chir ha'nivraim. I'm repeating. As we quoted Aristotle. Quoted you the Rambam in 3 places. That's her nature. She doesn't know anything else. She's doing something which she was planned to do. But you have other tools. Why are you following basically basic animal instincts when there's your brain there which has what to say? That is one tainug. And that is tanugim which are really base. And that's the tanugim that we live in this crazy world, which is judging people totally according to their types. How do I see this? I see this by advertisement. And you look carefully, how do you draw attention to people on a car or on a cigarette or on a whiskey? You put a scantily, if at all, clad female, someone around it, and people will go there. And it works. So this is animal world. But there are other things which are finer. I enjoy beautiful music. It's not that base. It's something which is deals already with some kind of level of intelligence. For example, man has a pleasure in being good, in giving. It's also a taiva. He's about taiva. He feels good about being a good person. One must ask ourselves, what are we doing? That's what the Rambam writes in the last chapter of Mer Nevuchim, the difference between chesed and tzedakah. I mentioned this once in the past. Tzedakah means to say you give according to your psychological necessities. Man knocks on the door and you give him X amount of money. It depends how bad you feel about him, how that makes you feel guilty about yourself. In order to exonerate yourself, subconsciously you're giving him money and you feel good about yourself. Rambam says this is tzedakah from the word tzedek. It's you're doing the right thing for yourself, but it has nothing to do with the word chesed. Chesed means literally altruism. It means giving for giving, not because you get anything from, not because it makes you feel good. Rare reality, altruism. Not that many people are balei chesed. There's tons of balei tzedakah. But the mitzvah alachta to b'drachav, as the Rambam writes in Hilchos Beis, In Perik Al, was a mitzvah not just to do tzedakah, but to do chesed. Ashver Zach. I told you I once remember, this is, the Rambam discusses this at length in Hilchos Tshuva and Perik Yud, that we do things because it's the right thing to do, and not just because it makes us feel good about ourselves. Not a simple thing. Judaism is a hard religion, okay? And this is what it means. There's a big difference between chesed and tzedakah, and that's a very big difference. Okay, and this is what he writes. There's a taiva also about taiva in this. It's a taiva. Midas taiva achetz. She'osim zilata. She is the tainik nifla liishato. You really feel good about yourself. I know. Here, Kiva just came after how many weeks or months of miluim? Kiva, did you feel good about yourself? I hope you did. Okay, you feel good about yourself, but that's also a taiva. It's a nice taiva, a shayna taiva. Halavai kol klal yisrael this taiva, but it's a taiva. In the yesh b'zegam ki madrega sheim taif shaloi urak mitzad ativi levad b'li avchanas haseichel. Hayne she'ois taif v'chesim kol abol yodai b'li avchanas b'tev l'ra u'b'li shum kavona pnimis b'asiyas hatav yitay arei atayne b'gezeu ugam kein taneg ba'ami. If you're just a good person and you're good to everybody and you don't think, there's no thinking, you just let it go. It's once again an animal instinct. You want to feel good. The animal feels good with straw and with mud. You feel good about giving alms to poor people, or feel good making people feel good. And you don't make a cheshbon when ra'la type. There's no seichel in it. There's weiter. You can be about taiva in mitzvahs. You can be about taiva in the most beautiful things, and that's ma'aseh behema. It's a very sharp thing. Bli avchana ben tov l'ra, ubli shum kavona pnimis basiyas hatoy v'toy, harei atanug bazeu gam ken tanug bahami. Shu itgabru ta'ava tivit uki yadua shebeima ikara hi b'bchinat midot bilvad. The beima has no das. It's just an interactive. He has feelings, and he acts according to his feelings. Ve'en l'das klal. וכאשר האדם מתנהג ומתנהג בפעולת המידות בלבד, if man just follows his instinctive behavior patterns to make himself feel good, b'li anhogas haseichel, he doesn't make a question. What are you doing now? You are now nurturing something which is horrendous, which is the chil Hashem, which is nurturing ra, not type, etc., etc. And I don't want to go into practical realities at the moment. Haru kebehema. It's a very important statement. Everything you do, even how you interact with people, has to have a my taima, minolan, my nafina. What comes out of this? What's its purpose? Is this Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Gamel Chasadim, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu also is, now no one's asking to punish people, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't give Chasadim to people who are detrimental to his purpose. He does the opposite. We're not going to ask you to do the opposite. Chalila v'chas, we have no din to be judgmental and to punish people, but you have to be very careful. Moshe and Hilchot Tzedakah. There's a lachas in Hilchot Tzedakah. People think about it. What you give, how much you give, to who you give, what are your priorities are. I don't know why everybody doesn't know Hilchot Tzedakah. It's ma'aseh b'chayim tzedakah, for goodness sakes. I have it, and everybody has it. You have to learn Hilchot Tzedakah to know what the Sidrei Kedim are. The Moshe Aniyah are more important. You want to help. I still remember there was this big campaign, feed the children. I still remember when I was a young guy, Bangladesh, the great concert with George Harrison over there. You know what I mean? But you feed the children, or Rwanda, Bangladesh, that was unbelievable. Woo! Okay, the music was great. And, Bangladesh, all of a sudden, everyone wanted to feed the people in Bangladesh. What about the poor people in New York City? Garnish. And you doesn't believe das. This is ma'aseh behema. This is Torah. Everything has to have das. Okay, I'm going to stop now. We will continue. So we finished the first two paragraphs of the second chapter. What did we learn? The shayrish was all ra, because we follow Taivas. Taivas, even with Taurus, if they're not done with Seichel, is an Isserli Sasarchel about from Acharnechem. That's rough. With Seichel, follow your Taiva, but understand you're doing it because ultimately you want nutrition and health. I mean, Phil, I'm take you out of business. You understand? Hopefully, you won't need a cardiologist. How Levite would be true. You know how he would be the happiest man on earth. Sit and learn all day. Okay, but the emphasis is that that's a lav. Not Kedoshim to you is a big milah. Okay, not up to that yet. But there's a blatant lav. Loisisem mem zayin. Okay, you can't get out of that one. Okay, that's Loisisem mem zayin. So I hate to say it, the Pri Megadim writes that a cotton also you're not allowed to give averus. So to teach a cotton to follow his taivas, you'd be machshel the cotton. He has to be trained from the beginning. This is very good, parents. Not everything the kid wants, he should get. You're helping him. He shouldn't be over. Ultimately, grow up into a very important yisoid over here. Then he says further, clearly that whatever we do, it always has to be any tainug. If it's a tainug gufni at all, you're just a ma'aseh behema. He's quoting the Rambam. I mentioned in 3 places. Even a tainug which is nicer, like music or even learning, or a taiva of midas taivas. If it's not with seichel, it's a behema. Now that is so Rambamistic. Anybody that does Ma'or Nevuchim would say, "Hey man, this man is like totally inspired for Rambam." He actually was. Okay, so this is what we learned so far. This is the beginning, the real truth of how we're supposed to grow spiritually. I was afraid of using that label because it sounds like how do you daven and sing Carlebach songs. No. It's all about using, my taima, minolon, my nafkamina. Big issue. Have a great one. Call 2. The sources of the Rambam. Kiva wants to know. Ma'or Nevuchim Chelik Beis Perek Lamed Vav. He writes Chusha Mishush Cherpa Hilanu. Chelik Gimel Perek Ches and Chelik Gimel Mem Ches. When he discussed the kedusha of the Nazir, what was the kedusha of the Nazir? He's walking away from taivas. His idea of not drinking wine is the idea of walking away from taivas. That's the kedusha of the Nazir. Why is it holy? Because he decided to use his brain and not his gut. Ad Kan. Have a great one. Kol Tov. See you guys around. Bye. Kol Tov.